crisp autumn morning air carried the scent of fallen leaves as 26-year-old Ethan Martinez adjusted his borrowed black tuxedo one final time. His hands trembled slightly as he gazed at his reflection in the mirror of the small courthouse dressing room. Dark hair perfectly styled, clean-shaven face bearing the uncertainty of youth, he looked every inch the nervous groom. But this wasn't the wedding he had ever imagined for himself. 7 days ago, his life had taken an impossible turn. 7 days ago, he had married Clara Whitmore, 71-year-old millionaire with silver hair and kind blue eyes, wearing an elegant white lace wedding dress that seemed to glow against her dignified presence. The woman who had appeared in his life like an angel when he needed one most. But today, as Ethan stood in Clara's sprawling Georgian mansion, staring at what he had discovered in her private study, his entire understanding of their arrangement was about to shatter. The marriage had been a business proposition, or so he believed. Clara had approached him 3 weeks earlier at the community college, where he worked nights cleaning classrooms to pay for his engineering degree. She had been visiting to donate books to the library when she noticed him studying calculus textbooks. During his break, his worn sneakers propped against a janitor's cart. "You remind me of someone I once knew," she had said softly, her voice carrying decades of stories. Someone who believed education could change everything. Clara had been breathtakingly elegant, even in her simple visiting clothes, but it was her eyes that captured Ethan's attention. They held a warmth that seemed to see right through his exhaustion to the determined young man beneath. Their conversation that night had lasted until dawn. Clara learned about Ethan's struggles. The medical bills from his mother's cancer treatment that had drained their small savings, part-time jobs that barely covered tuition, the dreams of becoming a civil engineer that seemed to slip further away each semester. In return, she shared glimpses of her own story, a widow of 5 years whose late husband had built a construction empire, leaving her with more wealth than she could spend in several lifetimes. "I have a proposition for you, young man," Clara had said as the first rays of sunlight painted the empty classroom golden. "A marriage of convenience, if you will. You need financial stability to complete your education. I need a companion, someone to share meals with and attend social functions. Nothing more complicated than mutual respect and friendship." The terms had seemed too generous to be real. Clara would pay off his mother's medical debt, cover his remaining tuition, and provide him with a comfortable place to live. In return, Ethan would be her companion for public events and help manage some of the lighter aspects of her charitable foundation. The marriage would last 2 years, after which they would quietly divorce, and Ethan would leave with enough money to start his engineering career debt-free. "Why me?" Ethan had asked, still stunned by the offer. Clara had smiled, and for a moment years seemed to fall away from her face. "Because you have integrity written in every line of your expression. Because you work 3 jobs but still find time to study. Because when I watched you help that elderly security guard with his math homework last week, I saw kindness that money cannot buy." The wedding had been a simple affair at the courthouse, with only Clara's longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, and Ethan's mother as witnesses. Clara had looked radiant in her white lace dress, the intricate patterns catching the light as she spoke her vows with surprising emotion.
Ow!
Ethan, in his carefully pressed tuxedo, had felt like he was playing a role in someone else's life. Their first week of marriage had passed in comfortable routine. Clara showed him to his beautifully appointed guest suite on the 2nd floor of her mansion, complete with a study space where he could focus on his coursework. They shared meals in her sunny breakfast nook, discussing everything from engineering principles to Clara's extensive travels. She was brilliant, well-read, and possessed a dry sense of humor that caught Ethan off guard. Evenings were spent in her library, Clara reading biographies while Ethan worked on assignments. Sometimes she would help him with his business courses, sharing insights from decades of managing her late husband's estate. Their arrangement felt natural, respectful, surprisingly pleasant, but it was Clara's small gestures that began to puzzle Ethan. The way she always made sure his favorite coffee was available each morning. How she had quietly arranged for a tutor to help him with advanced mathematics, claiming it was for the foundation's benefit. The evening she spent teaching him to dance before their first public appearance together. Her patient guidance and gentle encouragement revealing depths of kindness he hadn't expected. "You're a natural leader, Ethan," she had said as they moved through a simple waltz in her grand living room. "I can see it in how you carry yourself, how you listen to people. You're going to build wonderful things someday." Their public debut as a married couple had been at the annual Children's Hospital Gala, one of Clara's favorite charities. Ethan had been nervous about the attention their age difference might attract, but Clara moved through the crowd with such grace and confidence that soon he found himself relaxed and genuinely enjoying the evening. She introduced him not as her much younger husband, but as "my dear Ethan, who reminds me every day why education and determination can change the world." The other guests, many of whom had known Clara for decades, welcomed Ethan with warmth and curiosity rather than judgment. Several pulled him aside to share stories of Clara's generosity over the years, painting a picture of a woman who had quietly changed countless lives. "She paid for my grandson's medical school," confided an elderly gentleman at their dinner table. "Never wanted recognition, never asked for anything in return." That's our Clara. As the week progressed, Ethan found himself increasingly curious about his new wife. The mansion held traces of her life with her late husband Robert, but Clara herself remained something of a mystery. She spoke lovingly of Robert, but rarely in detail. And Ethan sensed a deeper story behind her composed exterior. It was on their 7th day of marriage that everything changed. Clara had left that morning for her weekly visit to the Children's Hospital, where she volunteered reading to young patients. Ethan had been working on a particularly challenging engineering project in his study when he realized he needed a specialized reference book Clara had mentioned seeing in her private office. The office was on the first floor, behind heavy oak doors that Clara had told him contained mostly boring financial documents and old photographs. She had given him permission to use anything in the house he needed for his studies. So Ethan felt no hesitation as he pushed open the doors and stepped inside. The room was a shrine to learning and achievement. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes on architecture, engineering, business, and philosophy. But it was the desk that drew Ethan's attention, and what he found there that stopped his breath entirely. Spread across the polished mahogany surface were detailed architectural drawings, not historical documents or her late husband's old projects, but fresh contemporary designs bearing a familiar signature in the corner. His signature. The engineering projects he had been working on for months, the innovative bridge designs, and sustainable building concepts he had shared with Clara during their evening discussions. But these weren't his rough student sketches. These were professional-grade blueprints, expertly refined and expanded upon, with detailed engineering calculations and material specifications that would take him years to master. Someone had taken his ideas and transformed them into buildable reality. Ethan's hand shook as he picked up the first drawing. It was his design for a sustainable community center, but enhanced with sophisticated environmental systems and cost-effective construction methods that made it both beautiful and practical. Attached was a proposal to the City Planning Committee, scheduled for review the following month. The second drawing made him sink into Clara's leather chair. His concept for an earthquake-resistant bridge design had been developed into a complete infrastructure proposal with geological surveys and environmental impact studies. A note clipped to the corner read "For the new highway expansion project," in Clara's elegant handwriting. But it was the third set of documents that brought tears to his eyes. His most ambitious idea, a low-cost housing development using innovative materials and energy-efficient design, had been transformed into a comprehensive plan. The accompanying paperwork showed that Clara had already secured funding, permits, and a construction team. Groundbreaking was scheduled for spring. At the bottom of the proposal was a line that made Ethan's heart stop. Lead engineer, Ethan Martinez, M.E. Below that, in smaller text, upon completion of degree requirements, December 2024. A soft sound from the doorway made Ethan look up. Clara stood there in her volunteer clothes, a gentle smile on her face, and understanding in her blue eyes. "Wondered when you would find those," she said quietly, stepping into the room. "I was beginning to think I would have to leave them somewhere more obvious." Ethan gestured helplessly at the drawings. Clara, I don't understand. These are my ideas. But there's so much more than what I could create. How did you? Clara moved to the window, gazing out at her garden where autumn flowers still bloomed in defiant splendor. My late husband Robert wasn't just a construction company owner, Ethan. He was a civil engineer, one of the most brilliant I've ever known. For 43 years, I watched him turn dreams into reality, and along the way, I learned more about engineering and construction than most people realize. She turned back to face him, and Ethan saw a depth of emotion in her expression that took his breath away. When you showed me your first sketches, when you talked about building things that would help people, you sounded exactly like Robert did when we first met. He was 25 then, full of ideas and determination, but lacking the resources to make them real. I helped him then, just as someone helped me when I was young and struggling to put myself through college. Ethan stood slowly, still clutching. The bridge design, you've been working on these for weeks. Every evening after you went to your room, Clara confirmed, I would take your concepts and develop them properly. I still have all of Robert's engineering software and reference materials. It felt wonderful to use them again, to see fresh ideas come to life on paper. The room seemed to spin around Ethan as the full scope of what Clara had done became clear. The marriage contract, the 2-year timeline, everything was planned around this, wasn't it? Clara's smile was radiant. December 2024 is when you graduate.
Ow.
Spring 2025 is when the housing project can begin construction. By summer, if all goes according to plan, you'll have real experience managing a major project and a reputation that will open doors throughout the industry. Ethan sank back into the chair, overwhelmed. But why? You don't even really know me. Why would you invest so much in a stranger? Clara moved to the desk and picked up a framed photograph Ethan had not noticed before. It showed a young woman, in 1970s clothing, standing next to a man in a hard hat, both beaming at the camera in front of a construction site. This is Robert and me at the groundbreaking of his first major project, she said softly. We had been married 6 months. I was 26, he was 28. We had nothing but love, determination, and the belief that we could build something meaningful together. She set the photo down gently. A wealthy widow named Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell gave Robert his first real chance. She commissioned him to design a library for her hometown, even though he had no major projects in his portfolio. When people questioned her judgment, she said, I'm not investing in his resume. I'm investing in his character. Ethan felt tears welling in his eyes. You're Mrs. Hartwell now. I'm trying to be, Clara said. Robert and I were blessed with wonderful careers and more money than we needed, but we were never blessed with children. When he died, I thought my chance to nurture someone's dreams had passed. Then I saw you in that classroom, working so hard, dreaming so big, and I remembered what it felt like to be young and struggling and determined. She moved closer, her voice gentle but firm. Your ideas are brilliant, Ethan. With proper development and support, they could change how we think about sustainable construction. But more than that, you have the integrity and compassion to use your talents for good. That's rarer than you might think. Ethan stood and walked to the window, needing a moment to process everything. Outside, the garden showed the quiet beauty of late autumn, with winter approaching, but spring already promised in the careful tending of the soil. The whole arrangement. It wasn't really about you needing a companion, was it? He asked. Finally, Clara joined him at the window. But it was, she said seriously. I was lonelier than I wanted to admit. Having you here, sharing meals and conversations, seeing the house come alive again with young energy, it's been more wonderful than I expected. I genuinely enjoy your company, Ethan. You're thoughtful and kind, and you make me laugh. That wasn't part of the plan, but it's been one of the best parts. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching golden leaves drift past the window. What happens now? Ethan asked quietly. Clara smiled. Now you finish your degree while gaining practical experience on real projects. You learn from the best engineers and contractors I can find. You build a portfolio that will establish your reputation. And in 2 years, when our arrangement officially ends, you'll be ready to take on the world as the accomplished professional you're meant to be. She paused, her expression becoming more tentative. Unless, of course, you find this all too overwhelming. Or manipulative. I know I should have told you sooner about the projects. If you want to end our arrangement, I'll understand completely. You'll still leave with everything I promised, and the projects will still move forward with your name on them. Ethan turned to face Clara fully, seeing her not as the composed, confident woman she usually appeared to be, but as someone who had taken a tremendous emotional risk in revealing her true intentions. You could have just given me money, he said. Slowly, a scholarship, a grant, something simple and straightforward. Why go to all this trouble? Clara's eyes sparkled with something that might have been mischief. Money is easy to give away, Ethan. Wisdom and experience are much more valuable, and they can only be shared through relationship. I wanted to give you what Mrs. Hartwell gave Robert, not just financial support, but mentorship, connections, and the confidence that comes from having someone believe in your potential. She gestured toward the drawings on her desk. These projects will teach you things no classroom ever could. You'll work with city planners, environmental engineers, construction crews, and community leaders. You'll learn how to navigate bureaucracy, manage budgets, and solve problems that don't have textbook answers. By the time you're 30, you'll have experience most engineers don't gain until they're 40. Ethan felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with recognition. For the first time in his life, someone saw not just his potential, but his character, and had chosen to invest in both. Oh, there's something else, Clara said, moving to her desk and opening a drawer. She withdrew a thick folder and handed it to him. Mrs. Hartwell left Robert her entire library of engineering books when she died. He always said he would pass them on to a young engineer someday. I think he would approve of my choice. Inside the folder were legal documents transferring ownership of over 200 specialized engineering texts. Many of them rare first editions worth thousands of dollars, but more valuable than their monetary worth was the note tucked into the front cover of the top book, written in faded ink, for Robert, who will build bridges both literal and figurative. Use these well, and remember that the most important foundation is always character. Eleanor Hartwell, 1975 below that. Clara's handwriting. For Ethan, who carries on the tradition. Build beautiful things and remember that the best legacy is always the next generation you inspire. Clara Whitmore, 2024. Ethan closed the folder carefully, his throat tight with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet, Clara said with a gentle laugh. Wait until you're in the middle of your first major project deadline. You're dealing with permit delays and budget overruns and contractors who think sustainable design is just a marketing phrase. Then we'll see if you still feel grateful. They both laughed, and Ethan felt the last of his shock give way to excitement. For the first time since his mother's diagnosis, the future looked not just possible, but genuinely bright. He asked. Clara's smile widened. Tomorrow morning, you have a meeting with the City Planning Committee to present the community center proposal. I'll be there as the project sponsor, but the presentation is entirely yours. It's time for Ethan Martinez, future civil engineer, to make his professional debut. As they spent the rest of the afternoon going over the plans together, Ethan began to understand the true scope of Clara's gift. She wasn't just offering him money or even opportunity. She was offering him the chance to become the person he had always dreamed of being, supported by someone who understood both the challenges and the rewards of building something meaningful. That evening, as they shared dinner in the breakfast nook, as had become their custom, their conversation took on a different quality. The polite distance of their first week had been replaced by the easy communication of true collaborators. I have a confession, Ethan said as Clara poured their after-dinner coffee. I was beginning to worry that this arrangement was too good to be true. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Clara raised an eyebrow, and now I realized the other shoe was actually a gift, Ethan replied. You weren't hiding something bad from me, you were hiding something wonderful. Clara's expression grew thoughtful. I suppose I was protecting both of us, in a way. If the marriage arrangement hadn't worked out, if we had discovered we couldn't live together comfortably, then revealing the projects would have been unnecessarily complicated. I needed to be sure we were compatible before I could offer you something so significant. And are we? Ethan asked. Compatible, I mean? Clara considered this seriously. I think we're more than compatible. I think we're kindred. Spirits separated by decades but united by the belief that engineering can make the world a better place. I see Robert's passion in your eyes, but I also see your own unique perspective. You're going to build things he never could have imagined. As autumn deepened into winter, their partnership evolved into something neither had anticipated. Clara proved to be a demanding but patient mentor, pushing Ethan to consider not just the technical aspects of his designs, but their long-term impact on communities and the environment. She introduced him to architects, contractors, and city officials, always presenting him as a promising young professional rather than her protege. The community center project was approved in November, with construction scheduled to begin in spring. Ethan's presentation to the planning committee had been nervous but thorough, and the questions that followed revealed that several members had been hoping for exactly the kind of innovative, sustainable design he proposed. You have a gift for explaining complex concepts in ways people can understand, Clara told him afterward as they celebrated at her favorite restaurant. That's going to serve you well throughout your career. By December, when Ethan took his final exams, he had already been involved in preliminary planning for 2 additional projects. The bridge design had caught the attention of the State Transportation Department. The housing development had received preliminary approval for a pilot program. Graduation day arrived with an early winter snowfall that made Clara's garden look like a Christmas card. Ethan stood in his cap and gown, diploma in hand, feeling like he was finally becoming the person he had always known he could be. Clara attended the ceremony wearing an elegant navy blue dress and a proud smile that outshone every other family member in attendance. When Ethan's name was called as the recipient of the Outstanding Achievement Award in Civil Engineering, she applauded with the enthusiasm of someone celebrating her own child's success. "How does it feel, Mr. Martinez?" she asked as they posed for photos afterward. Like the beginning of everything, Ethan replied honestly. That evening, Clara presented him with one final surprise. In her study, now officially designated as their office, she had prepared a new set of documents. The papers established the Martinez Whitmore Engineering Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to developing sustainable construction projects for underserved communities. "I thought it was time your name went first," Clara explained. "After all, you're the one who will be doing most of the work going forward." The foundation's first major project would be the housing development, now expanded to include educational facilities and community gardens. Ethan would serve as chief engineer, with Clara handling administrative and funding responsibilities. "It's a real partnership now," Clara continued. "It's equal decision-making, shared responsibility, and the chance to build something that will outlast both of us." As they worked through the details late into the evening, Ethan reflected on the remarkable transformation his life had undergone. 6 months earlier, he had been a struggling student with big dreams and limited resources. Now he was a professional engineer with meaningful projects and the support of someone who believed completely in his potential. "Clara," he said as they finished reviewing the foundation documents, "I want you to know that these months have been about more than just my career. You've given me something I didn't even know I was missing." "What's that?" she asked softly. "Family," Ethan replied simply. "Someone who sees the best in me and helps me become it. Someone who celebrates my successes and supports me through challenges. I know our arrangement has an end date, but I hope our friendship doesn't." Clara's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she looked like the young woman in the photograph with Robert. "Oh, my dear boy, don't you understand yet? The best gifts are the ones that keep giving long after the original occasion has passed. What we've built together, this foundation, these projects, this friendship, none of that has an expiration date." She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered garden where spring bulbs lay dormant, waiting for their time to bloom. 2 years from now, when our marriage officially ends, you'll be ready to take on the world independently. But that doesn't mean we stop being family. It means we become the kind of family we choose to be, rather than the kind circumstances created." Ethan joined her at the window, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the snowfall. Outside, the world was quiet and peaceful, full of potential waiting to be discovered. "Thank you," he said finally, "for everything, for seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself, for taking a chance on a poor student with big dreams, for showing me that the best buildings are the ones that help people build better lives." Clara smiled and patted his arm gently. "Thank you for letting an old woman feel useful again. It's for bringing energy and purpose back into this house. It's for reminding me that the best legacies are the ones we create together." As the snow continued to fall outside, Clara and Ethan began planning their next project, their voices mingling in the warm light of the study. They were no longer just a wealthy widow and a struggling student brought together by circumstance. They were partners, family, and friends, united by the shared belief that with enough determination and support, anyone can build something beautiful. The future stretched before them, full of bridges to design, communities to serve, and young engineers to inspire. And in that future, the most important foundation they had built was not made of concrete and steel, but of trust, respect. It's the kind of love that sees potential in others and helps it flourish. Their story had begun with a business arrangement, but it had become something much more precious, a testament to the power of one generation lifting up the next, and the magic that happens when wisdom meets enthusiasm, experience meets innovation, and kindness meets opportunity in the years to come. When people asked Ethan about his remarkable early success, he would always credit the woman who saw past his circumstances to his character, who invested not just in his dreams but in his development as a person. And when they asked Clara about her proudest achievement, she would smile and point to the buildings that bore Ethan's name, the communities that flourished because of his designs, and the young engineers he mentored in turn. For in the end, the greatest buildings are not the ones that reach highest toward the sky, but the ones that create the strongest foundations for the generations that follow.